cut me and I'll kill you.
The interesting thing about The Color Purple for me, which isn't one of my favorite Spielbergs, I'm afraid, is its approach to sexuality. It's the first time Spielberg deals explicitly with sex, and he has openly admitted that he reduced the sexual element in the book because he was embarrassed by it.
I was just timid. I was just a little embarrassed. I just wasn't the right guy to do that.
Sexuality in Spielberg is difficult because it's generally quite dark. I wonder if part of why he wanted to make The Color Purple to begin with was that he was sympathetic to the extremely troubled portrayal of sexuality in the book, and the reason he shied away from the sexual relationship of Shug and Celie was that it represented a positive form of sexuality, which didn't really fit with the rest of the movie. In this movie, sexuality is negative, which it tends to be in Spielberg. I think that's why it doesn't really work for me. The quite extreme sexual violence these women endure is harder to reconcile with the generally whimsical tone of the cinematography and music, but that may well be a problem with the source material as well. Empire of the Sun, on the other hand, is one of my favorite Spielbergs, my second favorite to be exact. It's preposterously neglected, and I've thought a lot about why I find it so desperately moving. If The Color Purple is a movie whose ambitions clash with the material it has to work with, Empire of the Sun rather sidesteps that issue by making that very clash the subject of the story. The whole point is that a child experiences war differently from adults, and eventually comes to realize that difference. The film culminates with Jim, played masterfully by the young prodigy Christian Bale, trying to resuscitate his old self in a scene whose unsettlingly dreamlike imagery Spielberg wouldn't return to until his later child-centric masterpiece, AI. Spielberg interprets Jim's journey cinematically by keeping almost religiously to point-of-view shots and experimenting with editing, as in this scene, where Jim realizes his mother may have been taken from their house during the Japanese invasion. Or this one, where Jim, interned in the prison camp, witnesses an attempt at lovemaking. The movie is overall uncommonly rich in terms of imagery. A wide array of symbols echo and allude to each other throughout, creating a kind of tapestry of interlocking images, all tied together by the brilliant script by eminent dramatist Tom Stoppard. Take the opening of the film, one of the most beautiful openings ever, where the camera, face down to the water, sees the coffins of people buried at sea float into the Shanghai harbor. Later, when the British war prisoners have been evacuated from the camp, Jim, in frustration, throws his suitcase of old belongings in the sea, having been abandoned by his American friends who he hoped would rescue him. Finally, when the war has ended and we see Shanghai celebrate, we return to the harbor and see that the suitcase has drifted there as well, having become another coffin, commemorating in its own way the death of something, in this case, of childhood itself. If anyone thought Spielberg was only capable of broad strokes as a director, this movie is the conclusive proof of the opposite, and the true precursor to Schindler's List, as well as a masterpiece in its own right. There's just something desperately moving about this precocious, privileged boy who furiously searches for an identity, wanting to be Japanese, wanting to be American, not even having visited the country that is ostensibly his own, becoming abandoned by everyone, and in the end, has to surrender even the search itself. This is Spielberg's first dramatic masterpiece, and one of my favorite films of all time.